Hi there, this is Rabbity Rabbit. On today's show, we are presenting Stars on Strings, which is highlights of the Puppetry Street Fair, which took place back on June 21st, 1986. It was staged as a tribute to Frank Paris. He's a puppeteer who is the creator of the original Howdy Doody, you know, back on television in the 50s, and we hope you like it. My thanks to Marshall Katzman for providing me today's program.
On August 14, 1984, Frank Paris, one of the greats of American puppetry, passed away. Born July 15, 1914, in Frederick, Oklahoma, Paris began his puppet career at the age of 13.
I had read an article in the Ladies' Home Journal on how to make marionettes 8 inches high out of wood and plastic wood. It was an article written by Tony Sarg. Of course, I'd never heard of him. But I was intrigued by the article, and for a year or so started doing abortive attempts at making puppets. Finally, when I was 13, I was very successful. I made a puppet 30 inches high out of cloth and cotton. That was on a Tuesday. On the following Saturday, I gave my first public performance for $5, and I've been in the business ever since.
On June 21, 1986, the Puppetry Guild of Greater New York held a street fair in his memory.
We have 25 pieces in the puppet exhibit that's being set up now that were pieces that Frank made various times during his career. And Alan Cook, the preservationist of the Puppeteers of America, will be here later, and he will be manning the table, answering questions to anybody who was interested in the puppets, and handing out a brochure telling about Frank and his work and his career.
Mary Dwayne Hoffman, a member of the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation, co-chaired the event.
Back in November, I believe, Leah Wallace asked me if I thought it would be a good idea, and I said yes. And she said, well, will you be chairman? And I said, if Patty Blackwood can be my co-chairman, yes.
The first time I ever met Frank was here at Gay Street. When I first came to New York in the late 50s, about 1958. And he was so kind and so considerate to open his home and his workshop to young puppeteers. I was a young puppet nut then. And he was so generous with his time and his expertise, would show us anything we wanted to know. And I've never forgotten that. I was very impressed. And the kind of work I do with symphony orchestras is very, very influenced by Frank's style of manipulation. I work in full view of the audience with no stage or no curtains or anything. And the dance and movement is all part of the act. And it was all learned from Frank Paris, who pioneered that whole style of operation.
Patty Blackwood is now going to perform, and you're going to see his wonderful act right up here on the giant stage at our puppet fair. So, give this wonderful artist, Patty Blackwood, a great, big, wonderful hand that you won't get natural.
Oppenheimer introduced the word origami to America many years ago and gave the first origami exhibition in America at the Cooper Union Museum in 1958.
I was interested in puppetry for many, many years. I was one of the early members of our guild. And I wasn't a very good puppeteer, so naturally it didn't keep me too busy. But origami I have done for so many years before that. But we do make puppets out of paper, little hand puppets out of paper, finger puppets. But
Did you know Frank?
Oh, sure I knew Frank.
Were you one of his students?
I certainly was. I took his, I think it was the class after the one that Alice May was in. She was in the first one, and they loved everything so much they called themselves the Parasites when it was finished, when the class was finished, and they kept in touch with each other. I came the following class, and it was entirely different. It wasn't held at NYU, it was held in the little house here. We used to come and meet here.
What is your most memorable memory of Frank?
Well, he's the handsomest man you ever looked upon. Tall, gorgeous looking, and very warm in his approach to you. And of course, he was a very great puppeteer. If you want to hear about him, Alice is right across the road here. And she worked with him so many years and costumed all of his puppets.
I had been doing puppetry for a great many years. And then after my mother died, my puppets were put away. But I got into it again, and I had met Frank at a festival, and I found out he was going to have a class in puppetry for advanced pupils in hand puppets. And I'd never done hand puppets, so I decided I'd join. And I had such an awful time finding a house because no one knew. I'd registered at college, and they told me it was going to be in his studio, but no one knew where Gay Street was. And you know how I finally found out? An ice cream hokey pokey man. He said, I know, I take you there. And so he brought me here. And this is the dear house where I had so many, many adventures. It was a beautiful, beautiful time we had there. It looks like a very little house. It's a very big house because the garden had been dug out and there's a big extension on it, a great big studio, and over that another one. And then each one of those is a 7-foot drop, so a 17-foot drop, so you can imagine the height of it. Now,
I have students that have been all over the world. Some of them as far north as Baffin Island, some down in Mozambique. It's really fun to look back and see where they all came from. A long time ago, when I first started to teach, I wanted to get a marionette in my students' hands just as fast as I could. So, with reference to Edith Flack Ackley and her marionettes, easy to make fun to use, I started teaching them how to make a marionette out of cloth. Well, it went very well, and after about our third lesson, every one of us had marionettes. Here's one example. Of course, this pattern is mine. Edith Flack Ackley's was taller and skinnier. That's that.
Doug Anderson served as the Master of Ceremonies, a full-time professional for 50 years in puppetry, magic, and children's entertainment. Anderson was an early TV pioneer as the magic clown for Bonomo's Turkish Taffy from 1948 to 1959.
Yes, Frank Paris was an old friend of mine. He lived right in one of the houses across the street, and in the good old days when the Puppetry Guild was first formed, we were one of the first people that helped found it. We worked with Frank, designed the puppet logo, and oh, he goes way, way back, practically childhood. Even I had a childhood. He was a very warm human being. His puppets were exquisite. They were just absolutely beautiful, as you'll see when you photograph some of the things Frank Cook is bringing along. And he was the ultimate professional. There was nothing but perfection in Frank's work. And That's good for puppetry, and it's good for the world. It's good for show business.
So, ladies and gentlemen, let's give a great big Greenwich Village, New York City reception to Susan Wall. Everybody, let's hear it.
Now, Trina, the ballerina.
That's always been my first love. I started with them, and then I've just recently gone into hand puppets.
Susan Wall worked for Nick Coppola since 1978. Coppola, a professional puppeteer for 30 years, recalls memories of Frank Paris.
Well, to me, before I even met him, I used to see his pictures in the puppetry yearbooks and puppetry magazines, that there was this very elegant, dashing gentleman holding very beautiful marionettes, and he was dressed in a tux, and the puppets were out in front with him. And it never occurred to me before that a marionettist could work his puppets out in front of an audience that way. And also, he had a certain glamour which is not usually present in most puppeteers, and that was very attractive to young people like me who wanted to be as glamorous as he was.
1952, I met Frank at the National Puppetry Festival in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Alan G. Cook, a puppet collector from North Hollywood, California, recalled memories of Frank Paris.
I can't single out a single incident because for me he was endlessly surprising. I told an old friend of his after his death that Frank was never boring. He said, "Oh yes, he was." I said, "I don't mean for the short run, I mean for the long run." Because just when you thought you were bored to death, he would surprise you again with something that was incredible. And this puppet that I mentioned was made by Joe and L.G. Fisher. It was used in performances in Oklahoma City when Frank was 17. He went up every weekend from Frederick, Oklahoma to see the show. He said they either liked me or they put up with me because I was doing this for a year. And he said they were the most important influence on him besides Tony Sarg. I asked him why he never mentioned this before. And he said, "Well, you never asked." You know, it's a typical Frankism. Anyone that knew him would recognize that approach.
Now, behind you are some of Frank's puppets. Can you tell me a little bit about them?
Well, I don't even know about all of these. He taught puppetry in New York, and some of the people that studied with him became owners of some of his material. So I think, Mary, you've lent some of these things. Could you tell me which?
Well, the Prima Donna is mine. He gave me that for my birthday a number of years ago. And he would, the Prima Donna, the lady in the velvet gown with red hair. And he would always apologize and say, "Don't have any money to buy you a Christmas present or a birthday present. Do you mind if I give you a puppet?" And of course, I didn't want something he was going to go down and get at the store. Santa Claus is mine, and he gave me that to work with my senior citizen program that I had in the 5 boroughs. And
this character is Dream, and those are some figures originally for the Firebird, which have been transformed as rope girls for a circus, which was done in the New York City Park shows.
And then, of course, there's the Grasshopper and the Ants, and I can't remember, he had another name for it. I don't know whether we used the subtitle or not, but it was a funny, and there was a girl, very pretty girl ant, and that's the Prime Minister, and I think the Grasshopper, and there's a warrior ant, or a guard ant. And then tell about Toby.
At the far end is a clown which appeared in a touring show Frank did for 2 years in the United States and Canada in the late 40s, based on the Toby Tyler of the Circus, famous children's book. And the very first Howdy Doody show included that clown, a fat lady from the circus, the ringmaster and horses, and all the characters are in the circus parade from this show. The irony is that this turned out to be the first Howdy Doody show, and the puppet that became Howdy Doody never actually appeared on his first program. It was not supposed to be a continuing series. Buffalo Bob was an announcer that was called in on the show to help, and at the end of the program he said, "See you all next week." And so the news, NBC decided they had better have it on next week because they'd have a lot of complaints. This, of course, was the days when the TV screen was about the size of one playing card in glorious black and white. So for many weeks, the continuing adventures of Toby appeared on NBC, and it was much later that it became known as the Howdy Doody Show.
You realize that Frank Paris, who originated Howdy Doody, lived on the street?
No, I didn't. Where?
He lived at number 12, which is down that way a little bit. Did you grow up with Howdy Doody?
Sure did. Yeah, you look at me and you can tell that.
He's my favorite.
Are you aware that Howdy Doody was born on the street?
No, I wasn't aware. That's unbelievable. I loved him. We were just talking about him on the way down here.
For his production numbers, Bruce Cannon utilized a contemporary beat.
Baby.
presented a street theater performance.
I was lonely sitting around with my old husband. So I said to myself, Judy, you can make a puppeteer just as well as anyone else. So I did. Here I am. Are you giving a puppet show today? You are? I can't wait to see it. Is it going to be adventurous? Or funny? Just a regular old puppet show, everyday life? Soap operas? Actually, they're called Elmer's Glue operas.
Do you want to say bye-bye to me? Bye!
Well, bye-bye, sweetheart.
In addition to marionettes, the fair featured hand puppets.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for Leah Wallace.
Okay, all right, here we go.
Together, a number of puppeteers who were performing in New York got together and became friendly. He was teaching and I was teaching. We exchanged information. We each had our own studio. But the main thing is when I thought of organizing the Puppetry Guild of New York, I had approached Frank and asked him, and he said, well, tell me what it's all about, and I'll tell you if I'll join. So I said, Frank, we need you. You're a professional. You're a teacher. Everybody respects you, and we want to make you our first president. And the steering committee, which started the Puppetry Guild, elected him as our first president.
From Alice May Hall's Miniature Marionette Theater to the body puppets of Ronnie Asbell's Puppetronics, the fair provided a variety of puppet entertainment.
We had many, many happy times together, both with puppets and traveling to things. And the nicest thing that Frank ever did for me was when my mother died. He insisted that I go to Texas to his sister's house at Christmas time so that I wouldn't be alone. And he flew from California. No, actually, he'd brought his car from California to Texas, and I had a wonderful Christmas. And it was a very kind thing to do, a very wonderful thing to do.
My forte was dancing puppets. I've done a lot of them. I have done portrait stars. One of Vera Zorina, the then famous ballet dancer. She said that she liked the puppet very much. She was interested in the fact that since most ballet dancers didn't do the split, I had the one of her doing it. And I said, yes, I saw you do it on stage, so I had the puppet do it. She was quite delighted. Every time I showed for Sonia Henney, she tried to teach me how to do her last spin, which as a puppet, I couldn't, rather as a puppeteer, I couldn't get it to work.
But he was amazing. He was generous with his knowledge. I think he was one of the giants in the field of puppetry. And things like today's event, I think, are wonderful. And it kind of chokes me up because he would have loved it.